Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Work From Home Show. I'm Naresh along with Adam Schrader, and today we have a famous celebrity guest. She's not only an actress and a model, but she is an internationally renowned hypnotherapist and best-selling author of the book Subconscious Power: Use Your Inner Mind to Create the Life You've Always Wanted. A topic that I think is extremely relevant, being at home, still kind of mentally being locked down at home. That inner mind has come into play a lot over the past year or so. So, Kimberly, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Oh, thank you so much.
Before we get into your book and the inner mind, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your background as it relates to your acting career and your modeling career?
Well, how that relates really to the book is the sense that I started really early at 14 modeling, and a lot of people kind of decide what they want to do or find what they want to do early. But what made mine a little different is I was living in Texas at the time, San Antonio, and was sent off to New York and Europe at that age. So that added that extra little kicker of getting in touch with your survival mechanisms and your primal being and your intuition, and really having the opportunity in a forced kind of way to, really get in touch with survival. And I mean, you could say, well, in the world, is modeling really considered survival? We all have our different, relevancies and our different comparisons for that. But as a 14-year-old girl put in that lifestyle, right? Very fast, lots going on and all of that. And although I wouldn't change it, it was definitely a challenge at the time for all of us. And so I started off, like you had mentioned before, modeling. And then, of course, that segued into acting and writing and producing. And then I finally was doing a radio talk show on KLSX 97.1 FM, which is the Howard Stern station. I know everybody knows Howard Stern, but if you remember, he was on terrestrial radio in LA for many years. And that was the station I started on. And so that really got me then into the mental health world. And in that, I thought, what part of mental health do I really want to be super involved in? And I thought, I want to be involved in the best part of us, the biggest part of us, the part that really runs us, like the who we are inside of us, right? So if you think of like who you really are, as opposed to an anatomical being, walking around, and a physiological being, who are you? And that's the part I wanted to explore, which then took me to the subconscious. Now, when I was doing the radio show, I needed some hypnotherapy to get over stage fright. I had felt, it's not a thing where you're on stage where there's 8 million people listening to you, or watching you and listening to you, but there still are a large amount, millions and millions of people listening. And I was struggling with that, the broadness of not being in a studio and shooting, a movie or a film, TV, whatever, but really having all of those people listening and staying out of the way. I'm sure y'all have experienced a little bit of something, like that with your program. But anyway, it worked. It worked fast and it worked amazing and it was powerful and I loved it. So that's really the quickest way to explain the arc from modeling to mental health.
Interesting. And during that journey, I just want to mention, according to your Wikipedia page, this is an interesting fact. You dated David Hasselhoff, who's, somebody who I used to watch all the time. So that's pretty cool.
That's funny.
Now, I saw on your site that you're a trainer in neurolinguistic programming. Can you talk a little bit about that? I've heard, a lot of people talk about it. I've heard that it can be very helpful for people. What is it, and why might it be of use for people who are working from home?
Well, neural meaning mind, brain, and linguistic meaning words, language. Programming is how we say what we think and how to correct that. A lot of people, we talk about filters a lot, in society and mainstream media, and filters aren't really all of it. Of course, filters are an important part of how we play well with others and, what's PC and all of that. Especially, let me just share, because of the at-home part of this, is that when you capsulize yourself into a screen, meeting or something, and you're working from home and you're communicating with others, either over telecommunications or phone or what have you, it's very important that you really, really, really say what you mean, because all of those impulses that the person sitting across from you normally gets from you, like you could say, oh, they said this, but I know they meant that. Well, how did you know that they meant that? Well, their body language. A lot of those things we don't get now because we're working from home like we are. And so just don't let it be lost in the fact that to fine tune those skills. So what are those skills? So let's just say that I had a lot of negative language that I wish I had something in front of me I could read. I've got so many examples written down, but things like, it really hit me the other day. I was blindsided by that information. Oh, this was on my desk and I never saw it coming. Well, somebody like that, I would expect to have eye problems. And I would expect for them to have trouble with their eyes. Blindsided, hit me, didn't see it coming, all of those things. If you spend your life with that kind of verbiage and you spend your life with those kinds of thoughts, then sometimes the body will react to what those impulses are because you're just saying it. It's not uncommon, as another case in point, to look at abused people saying, oh, I'm beat, I'm absolutely beat, meaning that they're tired, not physically beat, correct? So you want to be very careful about what you're bringing forth to your body or around you in what you say, because there was a time where our word was all we had. Really, it was our bond, and then of course before signatures and all of those things, but your word does reverberate out and it does echo out and it does create. It's not just lost on the sound. It has a life of its own when you say it. So it's very important to be mindful of those things that you're saying. Catch yourself, catch your friends. It's fun to just listen to others. You'll hear it in others, I assure you, before you hear it in yourself. But it's interesting when you do. There's a lot of that in the book. And the reason is because people will come to me and they'll just have such negative self-talk and just this ramble of all of these negativities. And you can see exactly how they built their problem by what they're saying.
Kimberly, can you give us a little insight into both the modeling and acting professions in the sense that this is what I've been told by some of my contacts and friends who are actresses or models, that it's a very testing profession. I mean, you're constantly questioning yourself. It's extremely competitive. How do you kind of, or give us an inside view of what that's like? And then, of course, tying that into the inner mind and how, models or actors, or really anyone, can tap into that inner mind to create the lives that they want.
So the most important thing that I think benefited me the most that I did was I compartmentalized myself from the profession. So in other words, I saw myself as a product. I didn't see myself as me. They're not hiring me. They're hiring the look of me. And it was very important to do that because I happened to have had a very chameleon-esque look. I could have done a lot of different things and did a lot of different looks. Some people just look like they look, and they don't stretch,
like me.
push the board.
Like me.
Look like you look. But for me, I was able to not just look like one way, but I had a really broad range. And so they knew that if they didn't know what they wanted, they could book me because they'd get it in the end because we could all work together on it when I got there, kind of thing. So I had that reputation. So that was helpful. But I also knew that people want to be around people who are fun. So if I was fun, and, depends on what is fun, can be 1,000 different things, but people do want to spend time with people that they enjoy and people who do make it fun. So that was number two. So first compartmentalizing, who you are. And this really is truth for any business.
Yes.
Yeah. And the biggest thing I would say, that's the biggest thing I've learned since, and is also very much in the book, is we never progress in the mind and the subconscious mind past 8 years old. We're all 8 years old inside. And so if you remember that about people, that we're really just looking for the fun of it, the honesty of it, the transparency of it, the vulnerability of it, whatever it is. So whether that means in the meeting, whether that means in the project, whether that means in each other, is be light on your feet. It's not all just so heavy. This is heavy, what we're doing in life, of course, right now feels very heavy. And so we're not ignoring that, but you don't have to live every second of that. You really don't. You can compartmentalize that just like you do your career, your profession, your family. You can compartmentalize this thing called, now. So it could be fires, it could be floods, it could be elections, it could be, Corona. You can put anything in that categorization, then you just seal it up so that you can be you from the time that you're, moving from your living room into your bedroom at night, or wherever your workspace is at home. You can now move into that other space and physically leave that, as well as mentally leave that in the other room.
That's really, really good advice. And you said it in ways that I've been thinking for many years. But it's kind of a hard thing to do. It wasn't until I would say I got to college that I was able to compartmentalize all these different areas. And to give you an example, let's say I had basketball practice and I'd be thinking about my science test the next day while at basketball practice. Mm-hmm. And then at science class, I'd be thinking about, the basketball game tonight. And so part of it is maturity, but in your case, man, that's tough, because you're a model, and if you're a model and you compartmentalize yourself as a product, like you said, and let's say the buyer says, "Oh, I don't like the product," then that's kind of, to me, it can be personal, but you have to kind of detach yourself from the personalization and say, what, business is business, and not take it personally that, oh, this Hollywood director doesn't think I'm pretty enough, or that I'm good looking at it. That's just a major hurdle that I think a lot of people can't get over, whether it's their height or their looks or whatever.
Well, so I have another tidbit for you then. Then if that's where the stick is for you, like if that's where you get stuck, then, and not you personally, but people thinking about it, is that then you take it a step further and say, that's not what the role calls for. Because let's take acting, for example. The role is the role. The director and the producer have in mind, and yes, of course, there's stories where, they meet someone and they're so dynamic and they're so amazing that it changes the mind of, it wasn't unusual that I'd go for small parts in the beginning, and then by the time I'd get the final pages, it would have my name at the top of, as the character, because they were, they like you enough that they start to then increase your lines, and then you maybe you're a little bit more part of the storyline. There's all these things. It's a mellifluous thing. It's not static. It can move and shift as it goes, but that it also is, some people might just flat out call this denial, but this was how I got through it. And you say, okay, the director and producer have an idea for this character. I don't fit the character. That character is not me. So however you put it, it doesn't really range in pretty enough, or, if you want to go thin enough, tall enough, not thin.
Well, modeling. How about modeling?
Yeah. So modeling. Yeah. So modeling, the same thing. They have, when you're modeling, remember you're product based, either clothing or, something, right? So you're getting a point across. You're the point of conveyance. So you're the thing that is conveying that message to the audience, whether it's a fashion show or a commercial for Advil, you're conveying the message. So you're not the messenger for that thing, you see? So it's very easy to, to do it. Look, there was a lot of pressure, and it's all over the news, for decades. There was a lot of pressure to do a lot of things aside from just modeling when you're a model, so you could look at it that way, and you could say, okay, well, I'm not willing to be that person's partner either, so you can call it anything you want to call it, but it just, as long as you are compartmentalized, that the you inside of you is not that person that is being hired. That person that's being hired is the product, is the look, is the shape, is the size, is the one, is the messenger.
So when you're talking about being able to compartmentalize, what was the one thing, or what kind of led you to the idea of compartmentalizing? Was it just the NLP, or kind of what was it that made you realize I need to actively work on compartmentalizing myself? And what led you there?
Well, so it was long before I was into the mental health aspect of it. And so it was purely not to be so rejected and dejected and disappointed. And so I could continue. It was mandatory. It was either, the sink or swim. And so my swimming was compartmentalizing, because no ego can take those kinds of hits. You just can't. And it doesn't matter if they said, oh, we were looking for a blonde, and then you'd be like, oh, shoot, why didn't I, do my hair more blonde today? Or, you always, no matter what someone says, if you're not in the right mindset, you can always bring it back to something that you didn't do, always. Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I do this? It's kind of just the way the mind works. What I was going to say before about when you were talking about thinking always about the next thing, when you're here, you're thinking about that. And when you're there, you're thinking about that. That's part of our evolutionary process. We're evolutionary creatures. And I just wanted to touch on that for a second, because it's important to know that mindset of being in the moment, that's wonderful. And it's great to have a nice balance. But you always want to be just aware of the fact that that's strictly our biology is moving forward. What's next? That's a natural part of us, because we evolve, we arc. Even in a television show, the character has an arc. Even in the course of a day, you have an arc. You start at point A and you end at point B, and something has happened during that day to move you from those 2 points. So that's a process. So sometimes people get upset with themselves when they do that. So I just say relax in that, because you don't want to live 100% there, but you also don't want to live 100% not there.
Yeah, and I think the advice that you just gave, it can absolutely, this is not an episode about modeling and acting. We can apply these principles to entrepreneurship, to business, to employment. There is an unemployment crisis right now globally. And there have been times when I've gotten fired from jobs. I've gotten fired from clients. My company had contracts that weren't renewed. And I've gone through that process of internalizing it and saying, oh, do they not like me? Do they not like the way I look? Is it because of what I eat for lunch? But like you said, if you can compartmentalize and understand, okay, I have a company, so my company is the product, right? Mm-hmm. We're really, and I know Adam probably won't like this, but we're really kind of just numbers to the modeling agencies, to our clients, to it. At the end of the day, we live in a capitalist society, and we have to deliver, and it's about things that go beyond our looks or our own personal prerogatives.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and what's also good at the time, like we're also at the mercy of the times. And so, how you look at old artwork from, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and what they depict is very Zoftic, voluptuous women and, all of this, and heavy was in, right? And because they didn't have a lot of the testing and medical things, and people died younger, and, it wasn't a thing. We weren't biohacking ourselves yet. And so you can see how a product of the time, not to take it back to looks, but just a product of the time, what's selling now, what's relevant now, what's working now, also a part of our bigger global evolutionary process. So things move, times change, we update, it's life 2.0, right? So it's like time to just get on with it and be okay with the fact. And also let it be said that there's something very promising and uplifting and magical about the fact that the universe can move you into things too without your real compliance or knowledge that end up being really good for you. So let's just say that, like, well, a perfect example, the other day, I ran into some friends of mine walking the loop around our neighborhood that were just like distraught. And I said, what's going on? What's going on? Oh, we sold our house. I said, oh my gosh, that's fantastic news. No, no, no. We didn't mean to sell it so fast. So I said, wait a minute. So what happened? Well, we put it on the market for way higher than we were expecting. It sold right away. And now what? I said, well, it sounds to me like the universe wants you out. Sounds to me like, where were you headed? Nashville. Great. Go. Run. Because for the universe to act that quickly and that strongly and that assuredly on something that is happening, pay attention to that. If you resist it, it's not going to work out as good as if you go with it. And you can almost feel the cleanliness. There's like a clarity to it. Does that make sense, what I'm saying to you? Like if you think of the times in your life where, wham, something happens and you go, whoa, I never saw that coming. So enjoy those times where that rapid comes and gets you and sweeps you off your feet and carries you with the energy of it, because that's a direct hit from the universe saying, go, do this, let's do it. It's an extra push.
Yeah, and we interviewed on a previous episode the founder and CEO of a company called Liquid Space, and I love that name because liquid adapts to the shape of its container, and so Liquid Space applies to workers who are just kind of working on the fly and will work from home, work from the beach, work from an office building, because they're almost kind of like liquid. And I make this connection because I think having that property of liquid, of taking the shape of the container, of rolling with the punches and taking what life gives you and just enjoying every minute and second of it, even when doesn't feel that great, or even when things aren't going well, and just cherishing all of it in, it is so important. Be water, be liquid.
When you look at nature and you see how nature, if you imagine a cliff that's going down to a super small beach area to then the waves coming in, which one wins? The wave always wins, and the water wins because it erodes that static thing that tries to block it. And it's exactly what you're saying. When you go with that flow, and when you're liquid or fluid or like kelp in the ocean, rather than the old dry oak that gets, stuck and, rigid, and it snaps, right? And it breaks, rather than the kelp that flows. So back to the analogy of the cliffside is that stuck monolithic thinking erodes away because the water comes, the water goes, the water comes. It's just never going to stop. And that fluidity is flexibility. Flexibility is life. It says change or die. It's the change. So it's very, very important not to feel like anything is static, because it never is. Let me tell you.
Well, that's one thing to say, and it's another thing to do. So a lot of the people who are listening have been employees for a long time in their life, and they're not used to having to become fluid and adapt. What are some things that they can do that actually help them be able to adapt?
The first thing is to know that you can, because we're adaptive creatures. That's how we're designed. So there's a thing even called hedonic adaptation. And hedonic adaptation is the ability to get used to change. So, for example, if I'm going to eat a piece of cake, the first 3 bites are absolutely fabulous. And after that, it starts to diminish. The joy diminishes. If I take a break and I come back to it, then there's a reuptake in the joy. If you are in a bad circumstance, that hedonic adaptation kicks in too. You start to get used to it. How many people are in a marriage that, is forever, long, and they just think, oh my gosh, but I'm so used to it. It becomes habit. So know, number one, that you can, and that is built into you, and that's your original blueprint, is to be adaptive. so much so that you can't not adapt. A lot of us have gotten, I don't want to say spoiled. We've become accustomed to calling the shots, and that's just not the case right now. It always was a belief, not a truth, that we were calling the shots. Who calls the shots first and foremost? Nature, really. Second, you might think the internet or your connection to the internet, solar flares, anything that's energetic. But the truth is that we're all just spinning around, and the more creative you can get, and this is in your quiet time, this is in the contacting the deepest part of you, which is what subconscious power is all about. I wouldn't have written a book, and certainly didn't reach out to anyone to write the book. Someone reached out to me from HarperCollins and asked me if I would write a book. So after getting together the proposal and all the things you do to start a book, the woman left there, and Simon & Schuster ended up buying the book, which was brilliant on their part, because if you have like two of the largest publishing houses after a book about this, you know that there's a shift in the world. And that shift, as it takes time to publish a book, has happened. And so we're well in the throes of needing all of this information, hence, the brilliance of y'all's podcast. The thing is that you have it in you. And if you're not using it, that's on you. Use your subconscious mind. They always talk about how many parts of the brain and the percentage of the brain that we don't use and all this kind of thing. That subconscious of yours is your mechanism, your machinery. This is a guide. It's a guide to put on your desk, throw in your backpack, the bottom of your drawer, near your workspace, whatever. But learn how to use it, because it's going to protect you from these times. It's going to insulate you from those feelings of spinning around and not knowing what you're doing. You've got it already. It's already packed and ready and loaded. The most sophisticated machine on the planet is your brain. And so if you're not using it, so the first thing, know that you can. The second thing is get out of the mindset that everything is status quo and supposed to stay that way, because it's just not a truth. It's more of a belief. And third, learn how to use your subconscious, because again, it holds all of the answers. There's one thing I do that would be fun for y'all if we were live or together would be, I would hand you an envelope with an image in it torn from a tear sheet from a magazine, and say it's a car, or say it's a lemon or an avocado, or it could be anything, a lamp. And I fold it up and I put it in an envelope and I seal it and I hand it to, let's say with the two of you sitting in front of me, I would hand you like 4 envelopes and you pick 2 that you feel like picking. Just choose 2. So you choose 2, and then I would have you write on the outside, scribble words, images, names, anything that you just came to mind, anything at all. It wouldn't matter what it is. And then you would open up that envelope, and the chances are that you would see immediately the correlation to what was in the envelope. Now that's just, nuts, right? But what happens is it works great, and it's fun for people to see how really tapped in they are, because you have access to things that are outside your immediate imagery. You don't know what's in the envelope, but your subconscious can feel what's in the envelope. So those things, if you can do that, you can figure your way in and out of, career issues and timing and problems and things like that.
Going back to one of the kind of focus issues that you discussed, and that staying focused at the task on hand, your book talks about daydreaming, and I believe you think that daydreaming is a good thing, at least for creativity, innovation, and productivity. I know a lot of people who daydream a lot. I myself tend to daydream, especially being at home when I used to be single, at home, alone, working. What else can you do? I can't talk to anyone. So what are your thoughts on daydreaming as it applies to creativity, innovation, productivity, and entrepreneurship?
So trance, if we go back to what trance is a relaxed state of being. Trance is a natural state for us, if you want to compare it to a product, 100% sustainable, 100% gluten-free, 100% natural, organic, and private if you choose to keep it that way. Your trance mode is your screensaver mode. So you can't be in conscious mind. So conscious mind and subconscious. Conscious is your task maker and your doer and your calendar keeper. Your subconscious, just below consciousness, subconscious, is everything else, running your dreams, your memories, your symbolism, your beliefs, your faiths, how things are organized, your immune system, all of those things, all the good stuff your subconscious does all the heavy lifting for. When you're in trance, it can happen many times during the day without your knowledge. So, for example, if you're driving a long stretch of freeway and you're not consciously paying attention of getting from point A to point B, that's trance. You're looking at a fire pit and the flames are dancing, watching kids play, watching pets play. Anything that's got you, like you said, like in a daydream situation, which I call zoning out, where you're just zoned out. Runner's high. This is a great example of that. So runners, they run, run, run. That metronomic sound of the foot hitting the pavement or wherever you're running, that is trance. Music, you're entranced when you go to a concert. Remember the old days where we used to go to concerts? When you go to a concert and the performer's playing and, you know, you've got the phone is set on flame and everybody's waving their arms, that's massive trance. When your favorite entertainer hits that high note and you get chills, that's trance. So that trance state is when you feel like you can fly. You are impermeable. You are amazing. You are outstanding. You are above it all. There's not a pain in your body. There's not a thought in your mind. You're in trance. That's where things are invited in. So a lot of my clients don't come for problems. They come for performance enhancement or amplification of something that they already do well. Most of my clients are very high performing professionals. And so they really have their stuff together. They're accustomed to hiring professionals. They're accustomed to delegating and finding experts, the best in the world at what they do, so on and so forth. The reason is because they understand the importance of zoning out. The importance is that this is where clarity comes, solutions to issues, answers to problems, aha moments, inspirations, creativity. A lot of my clients are in the creative sciences, music and entertainment and whatnot. And so it's imperative that they tap into a place where others haven't tapped in for them, right? So how does someone come up with the next sound? How does someone come up with the next film? How does someone come up with the next genre of something? It's things that haven't touched human, IPO yet or before. That's where we're talking about. That's like a super space area. It's like what I call super space. It's out there and it's charged and it's ready and it's channeling and it's looking and it just tap into it. So my best advice is tap into that. There's nothing you really have to do. When you read the book, it becomes very clear. So you know it when you feel it and you know it when you're there, because that's part of it. It's just knowing it. But when you get those impulses, it's really, it's amazing. I mean, you know that they're meant for you, like they have your name on them.
So in all your studying, as you were doing your hypnotherapy, getting certified with hypnotherapy and doing your NLP and writing your book, what's the most interesting thing you discovered about the human mind that people either may know or may not know? What was the most interesting thing you learned about it?
I would say our resilience. When you look at people who don't seem resilient or they don't bounce back from things, because it takes a lot of hitting for us to go down. It really does. And in the psyche, we have to take a lot of hits. And if more people knew how resilient they really are, they would straighten up and they would fill up and they would rise up. And it would be one of those situations where it would be transformative. We don't know how capable we really are. And when I see it, it's pretty amazing. So I think that would be the biggest thing, is the resilience of humans in the mind.
We have Kimberly Friedmutter on the show. She's an internationally renowned hypnotherapist and best-selling author of the book, Subconscious Power, Use Your Inner Mind to Create the Life You've Always Wanted. Kimberly, at home, we've developed a lot of unhealthy habits. What are the most common unhealthy habits that we should say goodbye to especially under this work from home centralization?
So it's wonderful that you mentioned that, because I have become very involved in the health and fitness aspect as it's related to the mind, simply because, as per your last question about the, the thing that I noticed that's the most interesting about it is the resiliency. Our bodies are less resilient than our mind. And if all things come from the mind, which they do, so even like the same imprint, Atria Books, that wrote or that published The Secret, published my book. And you'd say to yourself, however you felt about The Secret, this or that, where do impulses out into the universe come from? They come from the subconscious mind. So as it relates to health and fitness and what we've been going through at home, is when times are bad, three businesses really rise, and that's mental health care, alcohol, and sugar. So so if you're asking, I would say the two negative things for our health and fitness would be, any kind of imbibing and sugar. Now, the biggest thing is sodium. And it's super, super important. Sodium does not mean salt. Look on the back of the things that you're eating and whatever, if it's coming from a can, a box, a bag, whatever it's coming from. It was interesting because during the beginning of the pandemic and through, I'd say about roughly the middle, the gals here that do the shopping, they would say, I'd say, make sure you stock up on this and that and the other as far as greens go, right? And they said, oh no, the green section and the fruit section is all fine. All that's still in the store. It's the canned goods and the rest of the store that's selling out so quickly. And that tells you right there that when we grab for things that are unhealthy for us, not saying everything that comes from a bag and a can and a box is unhealthy.
All the preservatives.
Exactly. When you look at that, it tells you what we do. Here's the thing. When we're in trials and tribulations, whether it's corona or fires or whatever, that's when we need to be athletes. And that's when we need to be Olympians in our training and in our thinking and in our eating. And if you're not sustaining your body, you can't sustain. When you look at the issue with corona, you say, okay, well, obviously the most vulnerable groups, but the most vulnerable groups were those that were the most unhealthy groups. And that was anyone basically, when I say groups, I just mean people who had, obviously comorbidity issues. And so what does that tell us? If this didn't wake us up, we hadn't had that before. And so the next book I'm working on is about health and fitness and how that relates to the subconscious, because your prime directive of your mind is to survive. And health and fitness is your first line of defense, because that's the body that's carrying you around in this life experience.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of great episodes about health and fitness because it's so important to stay healthy and to exercise and take care of our minds and our bodies during not just the pandemic, but just working from home in general, because we can atrophy if we're just at home in front of the computer. Our eyes can strain, our minds can get lazy. So definitely check out our previous episodes to all our listeners at workfromhomeshow.com. That's www.workfromhomeshow.com, so that you can listen to those great episodes we've had with healthcare professionals, doctors, and other experts. But back to Kimberly, now I want to move on to relationships and how we can foster better relationships, because relationships and friendships are taking a hit this year, or just as a result of the pandemic, not getting out of the house as much, activities being canceled for kids, extracurriculars. So how can we foster better relationships while spending more time at home?
The important thing is the compassion element. This is a global experience. It's a global human experience. So the empathetic and sympathetic capacity just needs to be larger. There's one thing I say that really resonates with people, and I explain it deeper in the book, but that's basically that, and you may not know this, but everyone is doing the best they can, or let me make it smaller. We are each doing the best we can with what we have at the time. And that's an honest statement. The reason you can say that is because even the worst violator of, humanity is doing the best they can at the time. So imagine your spouse, imagine your children, imagine your friends. You're right. There have been so many breakups and friendships and relationships and things. I think far more than there have been people coming together. I think globally we came together, but I think within each home and specifically, I think that it's been like the biggest challenge hopefully we'll have to endure, in our lifetime, because we had to all immediately reinvent ourselves, and we had to reinvent ourselves in scary times. Back to your thing about working at home, that's the scariest, because home does not represent money making to us, and it doesn't represent value to us. It represents nesting, it represents sleeping, it represents restoration, it represents the cave basically to our primal being. It doesn't represent going out and killing the woolly mammoth and having food for the family. And that, I really sympathize and empathize with whoever the moneymaker is in the household, because it is scary to have to be at home. Now you're adding distraction. Now you're adding a mate who's also in the same position. Their space is infringed on as well. So lift and separate. That would be what I would say is the best advice, is get out. And whether you now take your meetings on a park bench, wherever you can go to take them, because getting out is the key. And, fresh air and all of that for your mind. It's also obviously very good for your physical, but your mind needs that mental break. It just does. You cannot stay. Now, let's just say that you're homebound and that you're not able to get out, like wheelchair or something precluding you from being able to do that. That's a physical limitation. Is then use that zone out method. So now you're going to use self-trance or self-hypnosis to take you to another location in your mind. That can work just as well.
Awesome. Well, Kimberly Friedmutter, internationally renowned hypnotherapist and best-selling author of Subconscious Power, Use Your Inner Mind to Create the Life You've Always Wanted. She was in Hollywood. She's been a model. She's dated David Hasselhoff. Her website is kimberlyfriedmutter.com. That's FRIEDMUTTER, kimberlyfriedmutter.com. Kimberly, any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners, or anything else you want to plug and promote?
The book did an interesting thing. It was like when country singers release a single and it goes, across the charts in mainstream music. The book did that. It was an interesting thing because it's mind science, and it also does involve some, soul and spirit aspects of it, because so does the mind. The subconscious mind is very symbolically oriented. But it did an interesting thing in that it crossed over to Forbes, listing it as one of the most important books about career you may not have read. It translated over to, best gifts to give your mother, your father, your children. I mean, it really made mainstream. There was another interesting list it made. Oh, it was about best books for attorneys to read. And I thought that was really interesting because it is about the human condition. And so when you look at something like that and you say, look, if you have a brain, you're in the game. Everybody has this. If it's not just to deal with yourself, it can be to deal with a family member, how to handle, your loved ones, anybody in your life, particularly in career, because we're all in sales of some sort. We're all vying for someone's attention. We're all, no matter what business you're in, if you're selling widgets, that widget is the best widget there ever was. And it's meant to be that way, right? I mean, we're meant to go out and perform and to, like I said before, kill the woolly mammoth and bring it home. But it was just an interesting thing that the book took off like it did. It just came out September 1st in its paperback release. And it was in 3 printings already by the first week. It had gone through 3 reprints. So that was very exciting. It's the time now to focus on you. It's the most selfish self-help book you'll ever buy. And it's just time to really get into your inner workings so you can know who you are.
Excellent. Well, Kimberly Friedmutter, we thank you so much for joining us on the Work From Home show. This has been a very high value interview for sure. I was taking notes and I can't wait to listen to this episode again. That's the beauty of having a podcast. To all our listeners, you also can listen to all of our previous episodes at workfromhomeshow.com. If you have any questions for us, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. If you want to reach out to us or just say hello, we're everywhere. iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, you name it. Leave us a review, take a screenshot, email us. We'll send you something good for free. We promise it'll be good. And if you get on our mailing list at workfromhomeshow.com, you'll get a free copy to my book, 50 Shades of Marketing. Whip your business into shape and dominate your competition. So until next time, keep on working from home.